Sorry, phone's weird. Nobody knows where this kid came from. So they take him in, and the bishop is like telling her, like, hey, you need to take in this boy. And she's like, I got better things to do. But she takes him in, and they name him Felipe, and he takes to her husband very strongly. He's like Pedro's shadow, like, and she can't have kids apparently. Like, she was like douching with vinegar to keep from having Juan's kids, but now she's just like, I kind of want a kid now, and I can't, and this sucks. So Pedro's like, I have nobody to leave my legacy to, but this kid's cool. And he makes him the master of their horses. And the boy is very antisocial and not in any way, like, emotional. Like, it's almost like he's spectrum. Like, he's got a tism of sorts. Because he's just, like, not relating to people at all. But he's thriving with her husband, and he's thriving with the horses. And this happened before the starvation, because he used to disappear during the starvation times and bring back food. And nobody was going anywhere during the starvation times, because you go out there and they're going to kill you and they're going to skin you alive, and it's going to be a bad time. He was able to do it because he's native and he knows how to move through the forest. That's what they thought. The city becomes a real city. They fortify it. They have they develop schools and all of that, and she's like develops her little practice for medicine and empanadas, and she's always giving to the poor, because whatever. And then a night comes where her husband is being sent off to, he's being told there's like a small troop of natives that are giving us problems over here. Can you help us? And he's like, sure, I got this. And he goes off all cocky, and she's like, I have a bad feeling, don't do it. And he's like, woman, you're emotional. And he goes, and that night, while he's gone with most of their good men, they get super duper attacked. And the city gets set in flames, and she goes full berserker. She ends up getting so pissed off and so frustrated with how the natives are like just destroying everything. It wasn't until, I like this, it wasn't until they killed her domestic animals that she was like, freaking no. So she goes off. She goes and she screams like a banshee. She gets to the they were keeping some captives for trade, which isn't a good idea because the natives don't care. But they were going to try to trade them or use them as collateral. And she goes and she's like, screw it. And she's like, starts beheading them. And she cuts off 6 heads. And then she starts chucking them at, sorry, I shouldn't laugh at this. It's real history. She starts chucking them at the natives. I looked this up. The paintings make her look like a man. But, and then everybody stops talking and fighting and yelling and screaming. And everything just cuts to dead silence, stillness, and the natives slowly start to retreat and they leave. And it said that, and she blacked out during this whole thing, she doesn't even remember it. And it said that the natives, like, all the heads rolled with the eyes facing the natives, and so they took that as a sign from their god that, yeah, we should probably get out of here. Her husband finally comes back, and he's like, you know, in love with her, and she's like almost catatonic, but she's better now. Like, she got over the madness that happened, and everybody's celebrating her, and they're like, oh my gosh, this witchy woman, she's the best, because they've been calling her a witch for getting Pedro to be with her, and now they're like, well, sometimes witches are pretty cool, I guess. Catalina is in no way affectionate towards the young orphan boy. She doesn't trust him, but she's right, because later on in the story, he ends up leaving the town and joining his people again. This is 9 years after the starvation. Actually, yeah, it was like about 9-10 years after he arrived. He disappears, and he just, nobody knows what happens to him in the town. They're just like, what happens? And they just assume that he died because everybody's dying all the time. Later, so Pedro dips. He's like, oh, I'm done with you. And she's like, he doesn't say anything, and he doesn't tell her why. He doesn't say I'm leaving, nothing. He just starts to go elsewhere initially to like go and like do jobs that he needs to do not with her. She's like, this is the first time you've ever not taken me with you. What's good, what's up with that? And then from his ship, like a coward, he writes her a breakup letter, and he's like, the Pope's leaning on him heavily. Apparently he didn't want to leave her, but the Pope's leaning on him pretty heavy, and he's like, we can't found a nation with an adulterous dude. Like, we're fine with the raping, we're fine with the pillaging, we're fine with the torture methods y'all be using, like, that's good, but don't be unfaithful. At least don't do it consistently with somebody that you admire. You have to like stealth your rape. So she's been catching the eye of her third and final husband. I can't remember his name. Starts with an R. Anyway, they get hitched because, she's got property and she's got goods, and she's not about to leave it all behind, but she doesn't have any rights to anything because she's a woman. So she marries him because they've been in love with each other for a while since Pedro left. It's been months. And she's like, well, now he can acquire my stuff and I won't be without. And they start their marriage, and then he ends up going to another area of Chile and creating a town there, and or helping to manage a town there, and it starts to thrive really well. And Pedro comes back and reclaims his house with 2 young women that he takes on as his Inés replacements. And then now the young orphan boy Felipe comes back, and he kills. Okay, so there's a little village there. The Incas and the Machu Picchu, I want to say is what they're called. I can't. They get with all of the native tribes, because apparently the Incan Empire is huge. Like, they span the vast traces of everywhere down here. Like, to places that, like, these people had to cross a desert and they're still not out of the Incan Empire. Like, it's crazy how, like, formidable this force is, and how capable they are at communicating between each other, no matter how far away they are. The princess is actually able to utilize this because they really respect her, and she's able to get information transferred between their settlement and the settlement they came from, and Peru, and all of this, because this is how vast their peoples are. They're just, it's kind of interesting, actually. I really wanted to like get deeper into it, but I'm already like how far into this. So there's a little township near Santiago, which the Pope, and not the Pope, the King of Spain deemed Santiago and gave to Pedro as like, this is your place, we value you now, you got rid of that witch. And this little village near Santiago is attacked and under siege, and Felipe is leading the army, and he's learned everything he could from Pedro and from, all these different methods. And Inés starts to put it together in her mind. She's like, wait a minute, where was he when they were burning our little village? And when they came to burn their village, they came under the cloak of darkness, and they had black blankets over them in the nighttime to like kind of hide themselves from, make it hard to see that was humans creeping up. And he got that tactic from Pedro, because Pedro was talking about a battle where it was in the snow and they used white sheets for the same purpose. So she's like, it's weird that they came up with that on the fly. Like, that had to have been, there's a parallel there, there's a correlation or whatever. So he goes and attacks this small village, and he starts a new tactic of battle where he starts to send in waves of troops. So he'll send in his first Indian troops to attack this village who's trying to defend itself, and then the drums will beat when they start to get tired, and they come back and retreat and drink water and chill, and the new wave comes, and they do this in 3 waves, and it's endless barrages of fighting and new healthy ready men that are not injured, they're not tired, and these other guys in this village are fighting consistently. They're not stopping. And if you've ever fought, I used to do MMA, fighting for 5 minutes is freaking exhausting. Fighting for hours and hours and hours throughout the night, that's insane. So they get somebody to go to break the ranks and get the message to Pedro. And when they do this, everything stops. They stop fighting, they stop trying to kill them. And it's not normal. And also the message gets through, which is also not something they expected. They're like, why did they let the messenger through? Because they let him through. It wasn't just like this guy somehow magically was the only white guy that got through the freaking jungle. So Pedro gets told what's happening, and he's like, all right, they said, go and meet me over at this other, like, abandoned kind of, like, ghost town, like, a old, I got the image of, you remember the Jungle Book with the monkey? And I got the image of that, like, old ruins. So he's going up to meet, Pedro's going up there, and the town people are supposed to meet him there, because the fighting stopped, and they're supposed to get there. But then, when Pedro gets up there, all the natives have met him there. And they got him divided between, he's up here at the ruins, and down beneath him is the water. So they're between him and the water, and they start the same thing again, the waves of people. And Pedro's freaking out, and he's like, what the heck? And the village people figure out that what happened, that, they're like, oh, they're not watching us anymore. They're not hiding in the bushes anymore. They must be where I sent Pedro. And which is like the stupidest freaking thing. What I don't get why they didn't just go to the village. It just pisses me off. It's like, seriously. But anyway, so Gomez is up there with Pedro too, and they just slaughter them, like all of them. They just get all of them, and some of them start to escape, and it's a group of like maybe like 7 or 8 people. Because the village finally arrives, and I think it's like maybe 14 people at the start that get there to help, and then they realize they can't get through the ranks of the natives, and they have to just leave. And the natives are already drinking, because they have this like ritual where after they get done fighting, they just get plastered drunk. And the natives are already doing that. So they're like, the battle's over and all our people are dead, let's go. So they go to dip out, and a lot of the natives are not even taking note. They're like, go on, I don't care about you, I'm drunk. But then some of them are like, I'm not that drunk. So they go to chase them, and Gomez is one of the ones that they're chasing. And as they're fleeing, every now and then one of them has to give himself up to be murdered by the natives, so that the rest can continue on, and they can kind of like waylay them with like more and more gaps. And I think it was down to like 6 people, and Gomez was one of the people that his horse, he's the princess's husband. That's why it's important. Otherwise, it's not even a mentionable note. It's like so many deaths. But his horse gets wounded, and he orders. He's the leader now, and he orders his comrades to go. Leave me. And he ends up stripping himself of his armor and hiding in a swamp with a reed in his mouth. Which his wife, when he comes back and he's fine, his wife is laughing about that while she's retelling the story. Because she joked about him always getting stuck in a swamp. I don't get what's so funny about it, but she had that dark sense of humor. Apparently Spain and Germany have a lot in common, because Inés talks about Spain's dark sense of humor and how that's how she relates to the princess so well, because she's got a really dark sense of humor. Anyway, because of the princess's little eyes and little ears in the forest, and the way that she is able to communicate, she's able to find out the details of Pedro's official death. And there's a lot of different arguments in it. Like, a lot of people say, oh, he was just clubbed to death, and that's how he died. But she's like, this is what the natives say happened, so this is what I believe happened. And it's like, he was a jerk, but this is rough. They skinned him alive and like ate his meat in front of him and stuff. Now, that sounds really bad. But Pedro had been, since Inés left, he turned into a completely different type of ruler. His entire purpose of going to Chile, he said, was because there was no gold there. And he was sick of all of the greed that was associated with Peru and how people were just monsters to each other and horrible to the natives. And he didn't want a mine. He just wanted a fertile land and a place for people to create a nation out of farmland. And that was his initial goal. And then later on, he was pretty gold hungry, pretty silver hungry, and really ruthless to the natives. Like, he started off as like almost a humanitarian, as much of a humanitarian as a conquistador could be. But then when she was no longer there to help guide his morals or whatever, he started torturing and allowing torture and participating in some pretty heinous practices of like marking their faces and cutting off their noses and ears and hands and sending it up the river so that the natives would see them, and then sending those guys back so that they could show their fellow countrymen, brotherhood, whatever, what happens to natives. Which is, I was listening to this thing about King Cyrus. This is totally a unrelated note. Cyrus from Babylonia, from back in ancient times, like I think like 500 BC, and he's the king that the Jews actually considered to be a Messiah, even though he was never a Jew. The reason why he got so loved and so popular was because like back then, the Persian Empire was conquering all these people and like taking them over and killing them all and taking their gods. And it was like this joke of like, aha, I got your god. And they'd take it away, and then the people would feel like the soul of the nation that they were trying to build was gone. And this other king, Cyrus, I think that's his name. Anyway, he shows up and he's like, first things first, I'm going to give you all your gods back, because all this did was piss him off. And there was a lot of really ruthless things that were done. And it was supposed to be like, this is what you get and you should stop being bad. But it only angered the people further to a really ruthless rebellion so constantly that the Persian Empire was struggling under the weight of all the people that they had conquered. And this King Cyrus shows up and he's like, okay, Jews, you get all of your goods back from we're going to rebuild the Solomon's temple, and all of your relics are going to be returned. And all of that was like his way of, and he succeeded in a lot of ways that other people wouldn't have, to the point where it's a question of whether or not Islam or Christianity or Judaism would even be a thing right now if he hadn't showed up to save them, because they all stem from the same group. So he's one of those. It just reminded me of that, because like in this story, Pedro is being very much like Xerxes, where he's just like coming and taking every piece of humanity away from these people and expecting them to be coward and to lose their faith and to lose their ability to stand up for themselves. But really all he's doing is angering them further and creating a deeper resentment. So, and to the point where at the end of the story, she's like, we're still enemies. This is never going to end. This is never going to change. We're still going to be enemies to the day we die. And I don't know, that frustrates me, because I felt like she could have been a bridge. With the way that she took her time to understand the natives, and the way that she learned their language and tried to understand their customs and was able to see them as people and a people group, she was capable of comprehending the purposes behind their practices and their faith, because they had, human sacrifices and stuff like that, but she was able to see it as like, okay, well, we're barbarians too. We just do our barbarism to other people, and you do it to yourselves, and you do it for a greater good and what you consider to be a greater good, whereas we just do it because we're evil. For her to be able to see it that way and still do absolutely nothing to bridge the gap between these two nations, I don't know, that frustrated me, because you were counting all these things, but there was no effort. It was just frustrating. You had a freaking princess with you. Like, you guys could have done something. I don't know. But again, like me sitting here with my car with air conditioning and heat, and like I'm very comfortable as a person. If they came from my family and my kid, I probably would be pretty freaking ruthless too. Like, I don't know. I'd probably be the first one dead, actually. That's what would happen. I'm like the first to go. I can't even get upstairs without huffing and puffing. So, yeah. It's very easy to judge when you're in the comfortable Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I'm somewhere in the middle toward the top. So, I shouldn't look at it with so much criticism. But it is frustrating to see, like, no humanitarian effort whatsoever. And in all these, she opens an orphanage for the Native children, which are not Native children. They're half Native, half Spaniard, because the mothers were all raped. And there's something that happens to a group of people when the mothers are made to raise the children of the rape that was afflicted on them. There's a viciousness and a ruthlessness in that next generation. And it's, you can see this from time through the ages. Like even in Germany, when they had their breeding camps, there's children born of that have deep psychological and mental issues because of the way that they were raised. Because it makes nurturing a chore or something like that. I'm not saying that for everyone. I'm just saying, like, biologically speaking, our chemistry changes when traumatic things happen to us. And our chemistry changes and affects the chemistry of our children, like the brain chemistry. To the point where, like, there was a study done where they found that a child raised without their biological father in the home, little girls get their periods earlier and little boys go through puberty earlier. And it's a strange fact for that to be, even if they're raised with a good father, even if they have a stepfather that was there from, it didn't change that. It was still, they still had that difference. So it makes you think, like, I don't know, just a generational ghosts or whatever, the curses or whatever. It was just, she opens an orphanage, but there's no accountability held on the fathers, and there's no re-education of the children on how to deal, or the mothers, no assistance given to the mothers, no explanation for, like, any kind of, like, let's help them, let's try to save them, let's try to better them, let's give them, I don't know, something. But everybody was pretty much just trying to survive. So I guess nobody really had time to think about the psychological impacts of an entire new generation of people that are going to be raised to hate themselves. I don't know, but it's interesting. It kind of explains, like, I always knew that this was why the Latin media always, like, favored the blondes and anyone that looked more native or, dark skin, dark hair. They were always the clown of the show, if they were in the show at all. And I always knew that there was a reason for it. I just I haven't been faced with the history of it yet. So this was my first glimpse into it, and it was, downright fascinating. And it's interesting too, because, like, I know about the Dominican Republic's relationship with Haiti and how they used to be one group, and then they divided it. Slaves are in Haiti, and then the Dominicans were the ones that weren't slaves. So they still have a stressed relationship to this day between each other because of that. And this one, it was like they had black people there, but it wasn't an automatic enslavement of blacks. There were black people from Panama and stuff like that were there naturally. And so it was another situation where you got a group of people that hates another group of people and enslaves them and all of, I don't know. I got to think a lot about it, because, the way the animosity is, it's very similar. It parallels very similarly to North America, or USA, relationship with black people, because there's a lot of that. Colorism is what they call it now, but it's we have the same history in a lot of ways. And so you can see, generationally speaking, like what's going on now with the Black community, how they still are struggling with the ghosts of the past and the things that they were deprived of, and their own history was taken from them. They don't have any like lineage to trace back to who they were and who they were related to and what part of Africa they were from. And there's a whole thing. And like from what I can see, they didn't do that as successfully, because in the Incan Empire and stuff, like what they did to the Incas is, yeah, they took their religion and culture away, but they didn't take their history. Like they made them religiously Catholic, and that's where you get that really cool the Saint of the Dead, Maria de los Muertes or something like that. I can't remember what it's called. I'm probably ruining it, but it's basically a combination of Catholicism and Santeria, which I love it. Like they found a way around the system and to maintain their little voodoo and all that other, the crazy spiritual rituals that they got that weren't able to be taken from them. But I don't know. I've never really looked. I didn't realize that Peru led to Chile. Like I didn't realize that that's where Spain originated from. There's a lot of history I didn't know about. So I haven't gotten to the 1500s. I'm still in the 1500s BC, trying to learn history. So anyway, Isabel Allende is an amazing author. She wrote a book that I need to review because I need to reread it. It was called The Islands Beneath the Sea, and it's a story about the slaves that come to America. It's very similar to Homegoing. I think I'm going to ruin the name, but it's Ya Gyasi wrote that, I think. And that was also astounding. I need to do a review about that. But Isabel Allende is one of those authors where, because of how that one book moved me, I see her name and grab the book. Like, I don't even need to think twice about it. And she wrote a bunch of other ones that are just, a lot of them are Latino, Spaniard, and South America oriented, but Hispanic, whatever. But then, you know, she has that other one that was The Island Beneath the Sea, which was just, it made me go into like a whole deep dive into the folklore and history of the slaves from, because she goes into them going to Haiti and then from Haiti going to the Americas, and the traditions and the religions and the monster story, ghost stories, the Duan and the, what is it called? The old boo hag, and like just where these things come from and why they're spread, why they're told. It's just like monsters, like their version of vampires and stuff. I don't know. Anyway, I've talked enough. I need to go home. But Isabel Allende, that's Allende. She's just the most incredible author. I'm grateful to be alive at a time that she has written a book. So check her out. And all right, catch you later.